from all, to all, with all, for all, through all. We thank the gods of creation. We thank the ancestors. We thank the forces of nature. And we thank the earth. We thank them for their direction, their protection, their guidance, for keeping us, showing us, allowing us to know and enjoy life to its fullest, now and later.
Black people who once loved with the slow march of time. Time was ours to hold in the soft, love-warm chambers of our hearts. And once we, the Afro mommies and daddies of a sun world, would turn our strands of hair into antennas to tune in the juju madness and syncopated love rhythms of Africa. And we loved with time, and we took the time to love, and with the right time we loved, and we loved time after time. Will we ever love again? Will we ever love again? Will we really ever love again? Or will we just sit and rot away with the brighter tomorrows in the skag field, rat-cluttered halls of our minds?
Black people, what y'all gonna do? Black people, what y'all gonna do?
Will the real black people please stand up?
And welcome once again to our story, the program that makes being black positive, relevant, desirable, and true to a lost nation in America, a program that speaks to the historical significance of the original people of the earth. Our Story Network takes pride in setting itself away from other programs that centers on entertainment or rhetorical mumbo-jumbo that misdirects your attention onto other things that causes you to exhaust your resources and renders you brain dead. It is Our Story who talks about commitment to you and your people. It is Our Story that champions the reestablishment of the black genius that once ruled the world. It is Our Story that focuses you in on the rewards of black advocacy, black activism, black involvement, and black power. It is Our Story that encourages survival of the black race and solicits your involvement to that end. Black folks must remember, race first is the call of the day, and we as a people must, I say must, take the pledge if we the people of the original race expect to survive. As I take the many lessons I have received over the years and reflect upon them, by sharing these lessons with my brothers and sisters, I realize the power that we as a people possess for the most part has gone unnoticed. The masses of black folks who have been rendered lost and disenfranchised from the meaning and mission our creators intended for us to embrace is all but depleted. It is because of the mission and meaning of the life of our ancestors that I realize how blessed as black people we really are. What fascinates me are the many gifts I have been granted, which allows me to distribute the information onward to you. As always, that message begins and ends with the importance of blackness. Say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. Greetings, friends, comrades, family, the inquisitive onlookers, and our beloved viewers. Welcome, welcome, and welcome. Our Story Network, we thank you for being with us this evening, and we trust you will take something of value away with you this evening. That is the aim and goal of Our Story Network, the network that leads the pack in modern-day communications and ancient and modern education. I say ancient and modern education because of the many errors we have found in the description and interpretation of ancient records. The modern revelations by new black scholars have opened the window of discovery that has allowed the truth of knowledge originally disseminated by the masters of education to flourish once again. The unfortunate part to all of this is the fact that many educators, both black and white, ignore the works of scholars who place light on the incorrect information that has been disseminated as truth since Europeans have controlled the world. Understanding much of the confusion right here in New Orleans is because of the incorrect information being taught as fact. As many of you know, I have authored a piece of work that talks about the misinformation and write-out lies reinforced in most halls of education, be they higher or lower educational institutions. Our story, the original Holocaust, covers black life from Kemet to the New Orleans Police Department, from Louis Leakey to President for Life Idi Amin of Uganda. So much locked in the 400-plus pages of our story, the original Holocaust, now available at Community Book Center, 2523 Bayou Road, Wayne's World and Sons, 2255 St. Claude Avenue, and on the West Bank at Educator's Delight, 3501 Holiday Drive, Suite 405. You can also order the book online by sending an email to wcjohnson76@yahoo.com and state you're interested in the book. You will receive an email invoice from PayPal. You make your payments online and the book will be sent to you. As always, thank you for your continued support and let me know what you think of the book. Tonight, we are privileged to have with us members of the committee that unlocked the knowledge of our school children being used as guinea pigs in an unauthorized social and scientific experiment. Social from the standpoint of being in an environment of social contact, and scientific from the vantage point of gaining results to be able to market the results for monetary gains. One could honestly say this is a comparative mode with the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, where black men were allowed to continue the afflictions without being told they were subject of an experiment. The same can be said about charter schools here in New Orleans. The parents and children have not been told that they are subjects in an experiment that will impact their lives for the rest of their lives. 40 years of torture and neglect was the headline for the Tuskegee deadly experiment. What will the headlines be for the parents and children of New Orleans public schools? With me tonight is Aaron Christopher, Director of Administrations for the Perdurable Foundation Incorporated, as well as legal researcher for the Burrell Firm, LLC, and a volunteer for Representative Dr. Joseph Bouie's Education Committee. Aaron has with him tonight several guests who will share their experiences on public education in New Orleans. I want to thank Aaron and his guests for being with us this evening. Aaron, before you introduce your guests, give our viewers a brief overview of the work and the role you and your volunteers play?
Well, first of all, I would like to say thank you for having me. The people that have been assembled in support of Dr. Bouie are here to essentially fight for a proper education for our children. As you know, the charter school system in Louisiana, which makes up about 11% of the school system in Louisiana, makes up 99% of the school system in Orleans Parish. The distinction is that Orleans Parish services economically disadvantaged African American children, whereas New Orleans has the highest African American population in the state of Louisiana. And so, along with Dr. Bouie, who's been fighting a very tough battle in trying to acquire a mere audit of our charter system to ensure that our children are getting and receiving a proper education. And so we've all come together to assist Dr. Bouie in fighting that fight to ensure that our children have a good education.
Great. You want to introduce your guest?
So I brought with me today Miss Donna Dr, and she's a parent of of a child who attends a charter school here in Orleans Parish, and Marie Harmon is with Step Up Louisiana. Ms. Dr was also featured in a publication by WDSU about her story with her child.
You want to start with Donna?
Absolutely.
Okay, basically my story is I have 2 kids I tried to apply for to get them into public school. We applied on the first day that the application opened, trying to get into a school that was close to our area. One of them is actually like one street behind us, for like 4 houses down. So we applied. I went to several parent meetings, recruitment meetings. I went to the one at office on 2 different occasions. I even took a Saturday and went to the all-day program just to make sure that everything was okay. I was told to wait until April. I waited until April to find out the results, and my 2 children received no placement. So they have no school. We were told to wait and reapply in round 2. When I went to apply for round 2, I was able to apply for my daughter for round 2 for the same schools that they said were closed in round 1, but for my baby, there is no round 2 for pre-K. So we have to go back to a private school for him.
So this is through the One App program?
Yes, sir, it's one app.
Now, I have a hard time understanding this, and forgive me, so I'm going to go over it again so I can understand better. Now, and maybe, Aaron, you can help me with this, because I was under the impression that if you're a resident of Orleans Parish, you had children, that the Orleans Parish School Board had to supply you with educational opportunities. Is that in fact correct, or is it incorrect?
I would say that it's correct in part. And the reason for that is because, for example, there is no federal legislation that ensures that kids have a right to education, or people have a right to education, a fundamental right. That issue is left up to the states. And so our state constitution provides for us that we have a right to education. However, the way the legislation is set up currently, the Orleans Parish School Board basically has no autonomy whatsoever over the curriculum, performance metrics, or anything of that nature in regards to the schools. So the onus of providing the education has been essentially delegated to these charter organizations.
Now, if I'm correct in this, the school system here in Orleans Parish is funded by the property tax. Is that correct?
That I'm not sure of.
All right, well, that's the way I understand. And if the property tax is funding our schools, whether you own property or not, I would believe your child is entitled to be able to go to school, because I know if you personally choose to withhold your child, they can make life very difficult for you.
Absolutely. What I believe the instance is that, you know, essentially they are providing education. the question is are they providing an education that empowers children?
Is it adequate?
Is
I
it
got
adequate?
you.
Exactly. And also to append to what you're saying, when it comes to the school board, because essentially at this point, the only thing that the school board can do is approve a charter or decide not to renew a charter. That's basically all the power that they have for our education system here in Orleans Parish particularly. And so and that's what we're fighting for today with Act 91, which is to come into effect this July 1st. And essentially what Act 91 does, it does a couple of things, but two particular things it does is that the purpose of the bill is to provide for the recovery school district to go back into the parish school, under the direction of the parish school boards. However, there's also a section that provides complete autonomy for the charter school systems where the school board basically cannot interfere in the performance, in the management of the teachers and the curriculum. They have no autonomy whatsoever as to what our children are being taught, how they're being taught, and how they're being accommodated in being provided that education.
Now, how many school systems in Louisiana fall under those same kind of guidelines?
Only the charter schools. And I don't know the exact number. There's so many numbers to remember that it's difficult to pinpoint those numbers. However, the percentage is, as I iterated previously, that Louisiana has 11% of its schools under charter. But in Orleans Parish particularly, the only school that is not under charter is McDonald 35, the oldest African-American high school in the city. And right now, they're fighting to find a charter.
For that?
To manage.
Well, let me rephrase, because what I'm getting at actually is it true that Orleans Parish is the only parish in the state that elected school board has been totally circumvented from controlling the schools?
Well, the thing about it is that there are some parishes that have only one charter school. And so their local parish school board is in control of all the others. Whereas we have this monopoly in Orleans Parish essentially with the exception of McDonald 35, all of the schools are charters. So that kind of puts all of our schools, particularly in Orleans Parish, which serves the largest black population in the state, the children, et cetera. And that essentially is the issue, you know, where it inherently discriminates against these economically disadvantaged black kids. And so other parishes don't have that issue because they only have one or two charter schools in the parish. It's a major issue for us because all of our schools are charter schools. Mm-hmm. Another major issue is the performance metrics, in that since the school board has no autonomy, has no say-so whatsoever as to how the charters operate or how they function or how they purport their curriculum, there's essentially no checks and balances, no accommodation, and no accountability for these charter organizations. Now, there are some schools who have had their charters revoked because they continue to fail. But there are other charter schools that do well. And I believe that in part of that is the result of this one app, which that me and also everyone else can all come into an accord who supports this cause, is that the one app also discriminates against children, whereas the charter schools have the ability to select 50% of the students that attend their school. So, and there's issues with that. So for example, there's this one parent who came to me, she was telling me her story, and she has two kids. One of those children was allowed to go to the school, the neighborhood school where she lives, but the other child wasn't able to. He goes to school across town. So essentially the parent is inconvenienced, especially if she has any financial straining in trying to commute her child across the school, or, you know, attend events and stuff like that, and then you have two children who are near in age of each other,
Right.
and they go to two separate schools.
Schools.
And you know, I remember I have a brother who's a year younger than me, and we always went to the same schools, and that was kind of a comfortability. If I didn't have any friends or anything, I could hang with my brother, or if anything went wrong, my brother was there to support. And so, you know, I think that's a big deal when it comes to the growth and moral character of a child who is essentially isolated from a sibling who, you know, they have this close relationship to. And I think that's highly discriminatory to have one child be allowed to attend the school in the neighborhood, but the other child can't.
I want to let our viewers know that we have opened up the phone lines if they want to get on the conversation with a question or comment. The lines are now open, and we look forward to receiving your calls. You have another guest, Maria.
Yes, sir.
You want to introduce her? And
Ms. Harmon is a member of Step Up Louisiana, and Step Up Louisiana has joined in Dr. Bouie's fight. We are currently advocating to raise funding for his legal defense team. Dr. Bouie has encountered some heavy opposition in the legislature, in the House, as well as the Senate, when it comes to this charter school issue. And so at this point, it's become a legal issue, and also a political one, whereas we have these legislators who may or may not, you know, have ill intent towards our children. I'll say that I don't think that any legislator intended for this to happen this way, and they may not always be as informed. You know, they're very busy people. There are hundreds of bills that are proposed in the legislature, and therefore I don't think that they should share the burden of responsibility as far as the way these things operate. However, I do believe that because Dr. Bouie has this heavy opposition in the legislature, that it's now up to a court of law to decide, and the support of the community to come together and to fight for our children's education.
yeah, before you introduce her, I want to say this. The politicians, you know, that might have been true at the outset, but they are fighting tooth and nail to keep Representative Bouie from achieving the goals that the parents and the people here in Orleans Parish want. And that is our schools back, the ability to control our schools, and the ability to control the quality of education that we're getting. So, I mean, and we're talking about the entire New Orleans delegation, and that is just terrible. But go ahead and introduce Maria.
Before I do, I just want to rebut that. In part, I agree. But the issue is that I think it comes down to the performance metrics. Because the way the performance standards look, it looks as if that the charter schools are succeeding and that they're actually doing good. And so if these legislators are using these performance measures as guidelines to whether or not this system is working, and it bears the appearance that it does, that they may not necessarily have that ill intention, as I was saying before, because, you know, all the information they're being provided with is saying that these charter schools are in effect working. And so it's you know, just in their defense, just playing devil's advocate here, is that, you know, I don't believe that they are intentionally trying to allow the charters to take over. I believe that they're in good faith, and that they have in effect written the legislation in this way because the information they're being told that that it's working, when in actuality it is.
Let me redirect,
Okay.
if I may.
Sure.
If that's the case, and what you say is true, then why is it we have a situation where Act 91 was done illegally, and they're not doing anything to try to correct that?
Right.
Why is it we have, I mean, hundreds, possibly thousands of parents complaining about the district and what is happening. And we have so many failing schools that none of these politicians want to come out and do anything about it.
I can't argue with that. And I'm curious to find out why myself.
All right. Go ahead and introduce.
Ms. Harmon, again, is a member of Step Up Louisiana, and we've all partnered up together to raise funds for Rep. Dr. Bouie's Defense Fund. And without further ado,
Yeah, again, my name is Maria Harmon. I'm one of the co-founders and co-directors of Step Up Louisiana. And the purpose of the organization is to advocate from a racial justice perspective for economic and education justice, not only in New Orleans but across the state. And I lead the education justice work. We organize directly with parents. And our first event that we had was back in June of 2017, where we held a presentation of the negative effects of school transportation. One thing is happening in New Orleans is there is extreme busing. You know, you have a lot of black and brown children. You don't see any white children out this early in the morning. Black and brown children at the bus stop as early as 5:30 a.m. and they're being bused way across town. If they're staying in the east, most likely they're either being bused to the West Bank or uptown or downtown. In many cases, like Ms. Duque said, you know, these families don't have access to their neighborhood schools. And one thing we lifted up from that presentation about the extreme busing is the fact that the One App influences that landscape. You know, so all of this plays into an experiment. And what has happened, this school bus schedule is essentially about 60 hours a week because children are at the bus stop at 5:30 in the morning. They're not coming home till like 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the evening. So that's a 12-hour day for like a child that's under the age of 10. And you know, you add that up 5 times out the week, you know, that's 60 hours a week. Mm-hmm. And you expect these kids to perform, you know, at their best academically. You expect them to behave a certain way. But if you have children who are essentially sleep deprived, what do you expect? So one thing we raised to the Orleans Parish School Board and to many other independent school boards in New Orleans pertaining to the charter school boards is that you are creating a system that impedes on your overall goal. Like, how do you create a system that's not adequate, it's not nurturing to the child, it actually puts them in dangerous and harmful situations, and it also it adds to whatever trauma is already present or creates trauma, you know. So, I mean, these are effects that's gonna mark our children for life, you know, and I do agree with this being an experiment. And I call it an experiment from the enrollment system all the way to the school climate with discipline, you know. And many of the pro-charter people like to say that, you know, the Orleans Parish School Board, when we had direct run schools, you had a high turnover rate of superintendents. This is true before 2005. But at the same time, it's the integrity of those people. I wouldn't blame the system, you know. And now we have independent school boards, charter schools that operate autonomously. You know, when you go to the performance metrics, a lot of these schools are self-reporting because of autonomy. You know, and there's 35 independent school boards in New Orleans, totally. So that is alarming to me because if you're an organization that's trying to organize like Step Up Louisiana, we have to meet with all these different independent school boards, plus meet with the Orleans Parish School Board, who many times says their hands are tied. It's very challenging organizing in this work, and which is why the pace of the work and seeing progress is very slow. You know, and I look at this work as like a journey, like a marathon. We can't get there in a sprint. You know, we have to pace ourselves and continuously, you know, work our strategic muscles and have some sound messaging and continue to uplift the qualitative data, which is the negative effects and stories that stem from whether it's situations that come from inadequate busing for the kids, getting them to and from school, parents who are suffering with getting their kid into a school with the One App, and even with school climate in the schools, because I also substitute taught for a period of time, and I've seen where they've used a very oppressive way of engaging with our kids for discipline. You know, like lines being taped on the floor to make them walk in a straight line. Telling kids to track me. Track me means look me right in my eyes, you know, at a voice level 0. Voice level 0 means be quiet. So these are oppressive tactics that are used in a lot of the charter schools. And I also call that inclusive with the overall experiment also. I really see this as a motive to say these black kids in New Orleans do not know how to behave, and this is the innovative way of educating our children so they can be productive citizens of society. But in fact, we have kids who cannot read at the right level than before Katrina.
Maria, let me ask you something, because I got a text in here when you first started, and the text stated that the metric system is a sham. So is that what you were describing by them self-reporting for this metric?
It's a prolonged event that happened retrograde all the way to a trajectory, you know, standpoint. When I first became knowledgeable about the state takeover in New Orleans, I graduated from high school in 2006. I'm from Lake Charles, Louisiana, so I went to high school with, you know, kids from New Orleans after Katrina when they, you know, evacuated to Lake Charles. Plus, I also went to college. I went to Southern University in Baton Rouge, a state HBCU, and I have met and became very good friends with a lot of the children of Katrina, the ones who graduated in 2006, 2007, 2008. And I know those immediate stories where how they were impacted being in an area of an environment of higher education off of like the less than strong foundation after Katrina in New Orleans. I can attest to that definitely. And, you know, being witness to all of that, like the trauma still stems from there. You know, like just seeing how all this had played out. Like in Act 35 passed in 2005, that was the creation of the Recovery School District and the state takeover. And, you know, they had graded the school performance score from a scale of 0 to 150. And then when John White, I think he's still the current state superintendent, he adjusted the score from from 0 to 200 instead of it being 150. And I think after some time passed, they adjusted it back to 0 to 150. So that's already a skewed measure in an inauthentic way to stay true and have integrity with, you know, analyzing data. And I really see that as a way of manipulating the situation and to, you know, twist it in a way to force it on people, saying charter schools are the way, you know. And in fact, the very premise of all this was very flawed. And one thing for sure is that because of the amount of autonomy, not everybody is watching how the public tax dollars are being spent. You know, for instance, we worked with a parent at Einstein charter. They weren't providing yellow school bus transportation for their elementary schools at Sherwood Forest and Bellagio. And state law says that no kid under the age of 10 is supposed to be riding public transit bus. They're supposed to be riding yellow school bus. And what the school did, because they can cut corners, they have autonomy over that delegated budget they control over, based off of the amount of kids enrolled. So whatever the amount is, according to the minimum foundation program, which is the formula the state legislature uses to allocate funding per pupil. In some cases, I've heard at least $10,000 a child. If you have special needs or an IEP, they get more. So if you have about 1,400 kids and no kids has any disabilities, so your base is about $10,000 per child, you're looking at a $14 million budget. And that money is dispersed in halves. The first half comes in October, the second half comes in February. So your school, independent charter school board gets together, they look at how they want to use that money, and in some cases, they really leave a lot of the money at the top and trickle down the rest that actually is used to educate our children. So you have Einstein Charter here saying they can't afford yellow school buses, but their CEO and principal CEO, that's the thing, you have CEOs that have carry the title in public schools.
Yeah.
And she was getting paid over $207,000 a year, plus an additional $80,000 in, they call it reimbursements and benefits and all that. And you're saying you can't afford yellow school buses though, but you're making a little under $300,000. And this is happening across the board in a lot of places where people really need to see how these charter schools are operating their budget. We can really be mindful of like how they're utilizing resources, because in many cases, just in my opinion, off of what I've witnessed, I feel like they're being used in a wasteful manner. I feel like money is there, it's just in how you use it. And I do see them as profiteering a bit off of this structure in charter schools.
2 years ago I'd have been comfortable in asking this, but since we've got the Trump era in here, I'm skeptical about it. But is there anything that feds can do to help this situation?
I think at this point, if there isn't any legal
Well, that's what I'm basically asking.
And that's where we are at this point. That's why we're raising the money for Dr. Bouie. Just to append to what she was saying about performance. So when I was requested to come and assist with this cause, I spent about a month doing thorough research. I researched charter schools in just about every state of the union. I looked at cases where, for example, like in Washington, that banned charter schools and found it to be unconstitutional. And I looked at all of these things, and performance was the most, it was what stuck out most to me. And the reason for that is because everyone in this charter system throughout the country that deals with the performance metrics all have a shared interest with the charters being, having the premise of actually working. So, for example, there's an organization called Credo, which is an organization of Stanford University. Well, Credo supports charter schools, but the issue with that is that Credo also creates the curriculum for charter schools. So, of course, they're going to say that charter schools are working. And this is Stanford University we're talking about. And this pattern you'll find all across the board. And as Ms. Harmon iterated, is that because they take in so much money, because they get public funding and private funding for these charter schools. So they're basically using children as chattel rather, to make money. It's a for-profit organization with no accountability from anyone. They create their own performance metrics. So how do we show that charters are actually benefiting our children if there's no third party to make this assessment, and everyone who is a part of the program has a biased interest?
Now, you said they use our children as chattel, is that right?
Absolutely. I mean, profit producing. For example, why would a child have to go across town to go to a different school than his or her sibling? That's highly discriminatory. And that's something that could easily be fixed. That's something that the CEO or the principal of the school can come in, or the board or the charter board can come in and rewrite the policy where that doesn't happen. They could make a policy that says, well, hey, if these two kids live in this neighborhood, or these two kids are siblings, then they have priority in choosing. They could do that. It's something as simple as that. But the reason why they won't is because the way things are in place, it's all about money. They don't care about changing the policy to ease some of the strain for these kids and parents. It's more about dollars and profits, dollars and cents, essentially.
Donna.
And that's the issue. And you know, and as I was saying, like, you know, with the one app, it's, you know, that's Dr. Bouie's argument. And so essentially the charters are unconstitutional, where they discriminate against black kids, they discriminate against disabled kids, or children that have disabilities. And it's essentially, so for example, the charter schools only service 11% of children with disability. That's across the nation. That's 11% for Louisiana and 11% for the United States. So that's a form of discrimination, where it's discrimination against needy children. It's also discriminating, discriminatory in particular to Louisiana, because children in other parishes don't have to suffer this. It's the black children in Orleans Parish who are the guinea pigs for this experiment. Now, you know, the term experiment, we're not just using that term. We didn't make that up, you know, as Dr. Bouie always says when he makes the presentation in his argument. And it's written at least 3 or 4 times in the law. So that was the intent, to experiment with the charter schools to see if it was an effective way of providing education to our children. And then later on, my position is that it became about money. And the reason for that, it's apparent. It's apparent in the deficiencies with the school system, with the transportation system, with the way that the kids are disciplined. There's all kind of inadequacies with the way that this system operates. And essentially, some of those things, as I iterated before, could be solved with just a change in policy. But the reason that they won't do that is because they don't care. Some of the teachers don't care. A lot of the teachers don't care. You know, and they just look at these kids as just being a part of this experiment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We have a caller who came on the hotline who wants to make a call. Caller, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Anthony, can they hear you? Okay. All right. Caller, go ahead. What's your question or comment?
This is Alicia Plummer, and I want to say hey to the gang that's there. What people need to mostly understand, what makes Act 91 unconstitutional, especially Section G of Act 91, because it takes away all the authority of our elected school board. And the thing that people need to understand is that it only affects Orleans Parish. Mm-hmm. No other parish, just Orleans Parish. And we have never had a vote for a constitutional amendment to change the Constitution of the state of Louisiana to allow for Act 91 to do what it does. So I just wanted to make sure we don't forget that part. There was never a vote by the body for Act 91 to supersede the Constitution.
Appreciate it, and thank you again.
Okay.
And a very good point.
Yeah.
And I want to go back to that point, and I want to go back to the experiment, but I would like to go over to Donna. Mm-hmm. Have a good question for you.
Yes.
Has the representative from your school district contacted you and talked to you about trying to resolve their problem with your children?
Not the representative, no, but I did reach out to one app, and they gave me kind of like a generic response saying that the schools were filled. You just have to reapply.
What about your council person?
No.
Your legislator?
Well, Dr. Bouie.
He's been out there doing it, hasn't he? Okay, so he is trying to do this. Any other political animal out there has offered to help in any way?
No.
That's interesting. That's one of the reasons why I say that the people need, whether they have children or not, they need to be involved in this.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have any children, the children that are there coming up are being shortchanged, and all we're doing now is feeding that pipeline to prison. So we're going to pay one way or the other. Whether you have children or not, you need to find it in your heart somewhere to come out and support this particular movement that we have going on. Now I'd like to get back to the experiment. Because they state in the law experiment, where does this place them legally?
And this is not legal advice, but my position is that it puts them in pretty much hot water because, first of all, in participating in an experiment that's dealing with children, you have this lack of disclosure. You know, sometimes I ask parents when I interact with them, were you aware that this was an experiment? And they say no. And then one question that I learned from Dr. Bouie was, did you give permission for your child to participate in this experiment? And they were like, no. Mm-hmm. And essentially what it is that black kids in New Orleans are being used as guinea pigs for the rest of the country to say that charter schools work. Because the charter school, the purpose of the charter school is to service economically disadvantaged children. But essentially, as you said, and I agree, that this is nothing more than a pipeline to prison. Because if education is the foundation of prosperity in America, hands down, you can't do anything in this country without a formal education.
Yeah.
And if our children are not getting a proper education, then we are leading them down the road to criminal behavior. And as I was telling you earlier, you know, in my study of criminology, I'm gaining a better understanding of how all that works. And it absolutely works like that. Because a child who doesn't have an education can't get a good job.
You raise a good point. In your studying this, it points to the fact that they are consciously creating conditions that's going to point our children to the prison door.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The example that I use is some of the movements, not in particular the civil rights movement, but other forms of protest and movements that were happening during like the 1970s and stuff like that. It had a lot of protests going on and stuff. But a lot of those protests and movements were organized by educated college children. And so my perception is that, you know, the 1% said, well, hold up, we have to do something about this. And so they started attacking the education system, because if they don't have these educated people who have the ability to think for themselves,
Right. They have no problem.
then they just conform to the way society is structured rather than rebel and argue for reform.
And we don't want to always say rebel, but just stand up for their rights.
Well, absolutely. I mean, if the status quo is set in a way that's inadequate, I absolutely am going to rebel against it.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And the thing about it is that, like I said, if the children aren't properly educated, then they're more susceptible to crime because they don't possess the proper skills to be a productive member in society. And so it's the social structure in part, because we still are rational beings and possess free will. But a person's environment does play a major role in their behavior, particularly education.
We have the fastest hour in television, and before we get down to the nail-biting period of time, I'd like to find out, and I'd like for you to give any contact information you have so people can follow up and get involved.
Sure. My name is Aaron Christopher. You can call me at 504-233-0695 or email me at treme357@gmail.com. That's TREME357@gmail.com. You can email me or shoot me a text. Any parents out there that have any concerns or grievances and would like to join in our cause to help raise funds for Dr. Bouie so that he can continue his fight for our children's education.
Okay, before we go to Donna, I want to go to Marie, because Marie, you have set up?
Oh, Step Up.
Step Up, I'm sorry. You want to tell us quickly about that, and if people are interested, where they can get in touch?
Yes. Again, I'm with Step Up Louisiana. You can look us up online, www.stepuplouisiana.org. You can reach us at 504-322-4663 and stepuplouisiana@gmail.com.
All right, Donna.
Yes, I just had one more thing to say. I wanted to say that when we speak about the experiment part, they speak about one app as if it was a lottery system. And they use the word lottery, and usually when you think of lottery, you think of you winning a prize. And either you win the prize or you go home. But we have to remember that we're talking about kids, so it's not you just win or you go home. These are children, and they all deserve to win. They all deserve a spot in schools, and they're not getting that.
Absolutely. But and then in reference to that, the One App's main promotional cliche is that it's about choice. But essentially, the parents and the kids don't have any choice.
Yes, you're so right. That is a misnomer, the choice.
Absolutely.
I know there's going to be meetings, especially for the fundraising arm of this, and I'm sure there's going to be other meetings because We just had a meeting last Thursday. I was in attendance there, and I must say that you guys put on a very informative meeting, and it was well attended by the community. The headline of the program, I believe, mentioned something about the ministers. I didn't think there was enough of them there.
I agree.
There's something that we're going to have to do, because these ministers bring these politicians up into the pulpits when it's time to vote. So why can't they bring our organizations up in the pulpit when it's time to stand up and to defend our children or any other problem we have? What good are they if they're not servicing their constituents? So I'm going to be looking more for our ministerial alliances to become involved and do more, because I think they should be doing far more than they're doing. The other thing is, I think you have quite a bit of activity and response from the, what do you call it, the nonprofit organization community. And are they coming in and rendering assistance as well?
That I'm not sure, because Alicia Plummer is the person to contact about
that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Well, in fact, we just had her, I think, on here last week. Yeah. But you know, I'm going to invite you guys back again. I mean, if we have to just ram this down the throats of folks until they get the point, we're going to have to do that.
Absolutely.
Because we're talking about our children.
Right.
And if we're not going to stand up for them, then who or what will we stand up for? It makes no sense to me. Well, I'm going to digress. I have 4 children. I was fighting over at the school board, and we're going back to the 80s and 90s, to have the system changed, to have things accepted, to bring more African American programs into there, to have a greater challenging curriculum. I homeschool all my children. My children did not see a classroom until they entered college. A few years ago, I was part of a group that formed a alternative school, because Carver was putting out so many children for behavior problems that we decided to set up a school. And this is another avenue we're really going to have to look at, because my thing is, if the system is not doing what it is, we need to pull our children out of there. But they're telling me the clock on the wall says it's time for me to get out of here. So I'm going to start with Donna. You give you 10 seconds, then I'll give Maria 10 seconds to say parting words, and I'll come over and give Aaron a chance to say something. Donna?
Okay, thank you for having me here. All I want basically is just some fairness. I want to be able to send my kids to school and not have to drive and pass up 4 and 5 Orleans Parish schools to go to Metairie and pay tuition. So I just want fairness.
All hope isn't lost. There's still efforts we can make if we stick together and truly organize for change. Again, my name is Maria Harmon with Step Up Louisiana. I do organize with parents. If you want to start to organize against discrimination with the One app and really pushing for.
I'll make sure they give you a call.
Yes.
Aaron?
I just want to thank the ladies for coming on with me on the show. Thank you for having me. And I just want to say that this is a very serious fight for our children, and I think that every adult in this parish should take it very seriously. And not only that, but this moment in history, this moment in time where we are, it is very, very pertinent that we make sure that our children have a good education, especially with the way things are in the world today.
We have run down to the final tick-tock. There it is. Hey, I appreciate you being here with us. Come back and see us next week. Remember, Monday mornings on the Chuck Perkins Show, WBOK, 12:30 a.m. Until then, brothers and sisters, stay strong, stay black, but most importantly, stay involved. Yahoro Sasa Ungawa.
We sing songs not for the accolades, to lift voices like a helicopter blade. High in the listening skies, my eyes glisten and tears drop down like rain. Not from the pain, from the joy of how far we came. My brainstorms are designed to celebrate our reign. The collective, monuments erected, continents affected, presidents elected, ancestors making moves with the music we've been blessed with. We use it to keep communities connected. Through harmonies, a harmony is collected. Reaping the fruits our foremothers invested. Lift every voice till freedom has manifested. Come on, yeah, lift every voice till freedom has manifested. Come on, listen, lift every voice till freedom has manifested. Come on, come on, come on, come on.
Sing a song,
yeah, talk to
full of the faith that the dark past has taught us.
come on.
Sing a song, full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun.
Facing the rising sun. Come on.
Of our new day begun.
It's a new day.
Let us march on
Yeah.
till victory is
Yeah,
won. Till victory is
This is
won.
victory music. Come on, I hope you feel it.
Yeah, yeah.